Welcome to Semiconductor News Decoded. I'm Ty, with 31 years inside the semiconductor industry, bringing you the real view from the factory floor. Today's topic: the U.S. Secretary of Commerce has raised concerns that ASML's EUV lithography equipment, or related technology, may have found its way into China. This story cuts right to the heart of global semiconductor security. As always, I'll explain everything in the most simplified way possible. Even a middle schooler should be able to follow along. If you're a specialist watching, some parts may feel oversimplified, but I'd like to prioritize giving everyone the big picture first. Think of it as a story about the world's most exclusive kitchen knife, one that only a single shop in the world knows how to forge, and who it might have ended up with. So sit back and enjoy. Here's the analogy I want you to picture. There is a knife, a one-of-a-kind, handcrafted blade made using a secret technique that no other shop in the world possesses. This knife is so special that there are certain countries it is absolutely forbidden to sell to. And now the authorities have started to suspect, did this knife somehow end up in the wrong hands? The knife shop is firmly denying it. We absolutely did not sell it, they say. And to be fair, this knife is extraordinarily heavy. You need specialized transportation equipment just to move it. Slipping it across a border unnoticed would be nearly physically impossible. But the authorities aren't just worried about the knife itself. They're asking, could the custom carrying case or certain individual parts have made it across somehow? What the authorities are really focused on is not necessarily the full knife. It's the specialized transport case built specifically for it, and individual components. If the recipe for forging the knife leaked out, that would obviously be a serious problem. But if physical hardware, even just parts, has been circulating, that is a different kind of problem entirely, and potentially just as dangerous. This knife shop happens to be based in the Netherlands. The secret forging techniques it uses were developed over decades with the support of allied nations, including Japan and the United States. So when the warning came, it wasn't just a polite heads up. It carried the message: please conduct a thorough review of your factory floor and your entire supplier network.
Here's the key insight. It almost doesn't matter whether the knife actually crossed the border. The fact that the United States has formally stated, "We suspect it might have," and that statement is now public knowledge, is itself a major development. With that context in place, let me now walk you through what this knife shop story looks like in the real world of the semiconductor industry.
Let me summarize the knife shop stance. The shop denies any sale, firmly and completely. Now let me take you into the actual story. The news is this: the U.S. Secretary of Commerce has communicated concerns to ASML, a Dutch semiconductor lithography equipment maker and the world's sole supplier of EUV systems, that EUV equipment or related technology may have been transferred to China. And honestly, the real-world ASML situation maps almost perfectly onto the knife shop story I just described. ASML's EUV lithography systems are the knife. China is the country it cannot be sold to, and the U.S. government is the authority asking questions. EUV stands for extreme ultraviolet. It uses light with a wavelength of just 13.5 nanometers to etch circuit patterns onto chips. It is indispensable for today's most advanced logic semiconductors. For example, TSMC's 2 nanometer and 3 nanometer processes, which power the chips inside your smartphone. ASML has a virtual monopoly on EUV lithography systems. A single unit reportedly costs upward of $200 million. Transporting one requires multiple cargo aircraft. The sheer scale of the operation makes it essentially physically impossible to smuggle one in secretly. EUV exports to China have been effectively banned since 2019, when the Dutch government stopped issuing export licenses. This ban is also aligned with U.S. export controls. ASML has categorically denied shipping any EUV equipment or dedicated EUV components to China. So why has the U.S. raised this concern? Based on my years on the factory floor, my read is this: the suspicion is not necessarily about the full machine. It's about whether specialized EUV transport hardware or related components have reached China through some indirect channel. An EUV system is made up of tens of thousands of parts,
and its supplier base is scattered across the globe.
The core components of an EUV system come from a small group of elite suppliers: Zeiss of Germany for the optical systems, Kymer of the United States for the light source, and Trumpf of Germany for the laser. At that level, Chinese involvement is essentially zero. But at the lower tiers, subcomponents and peripheral materials, it becomes harder to say with absolute certainty that no connection exists. That is the potential technology transfer risk hiding in the background of this.
There is another dimension worth noting. ASML has shipped multiple DUV, deep ultraviolet, lithography systems to China, and its engineers make regular on-site maintenance visits. The documentation and human interactions involved in those DUV service visits may, in a separate context, be viewed as a potential vector for EUV-related information to leak. This cannot be entirely ruled out.
The Netherlands has its own export control framework, and it is in constant negotiation with the US about where to draw the lines. The Secretary of Commerce's formal expression of concern reads more like pressure than a simple information-sharing exercise. We want you to tighten the controls further. It has happened before. The US previously pushed the Netherlands to restrict DUV exports to China, and those controls were indeed tightened. A similar sequence of events could very well be unfolding now. ASML's full denial is, of course, the only possible response. When US authorities raise a concern, there is no option for a company other than to officially deny it. What matters here is not who is right. It is the fact that the US government decided to raise this issue formally, which means there's some basis for doing so. As of now, no leak has been confirmed. But it is perfectly reasonable to assume that US authorities had some basis for their concern before communicating it through official channels. Raising a groundless concern through diplomatic back channels is simply not how these things work. If this turns out to be true, the implications for China's advanced semiconductor development would be significant. That said, even if China obtained technical information or partial components without the full machine, commercializing EUV-based processes would require an enormous amount of additional development. It would not immediately translate into a threat. However, if China continues to accumulate component-level knowledge over time, the picture could look very different in 5 or 10 years. That is precisely why this cannot simply be ignored, even if the immediate risk seems manageable. Let me bring today's content together. The U.S. Secretary of Commerce has reportedly communicated concerns to ASML that EUV equipment or related technology may have been transferred to China. ASML has categorically denied shipping any EUV systems or dedicated components to China. As of now, no transfer has been confirmed. We're in a situation where the U.S. has raised concerns and ASML has denied them. The suspected pathways are not just the machine itself, but potentially specialized transport equipment, related components, and human contact through DUV maintenance visits, a combination of channels. This story also carries the dimension of pressure on the Netherlands to tighten its export controls further, and it is one that warrants continued close attention. Let me leave you with my overall take. The real story here is not, did the EUV get to China? It is, the US government believes there are grounds to be concerned. From where I stand, with 3 decades on the factory floor, I read this as investigation and deterrence happening at the same time. ASML's technology is protected by an entire supply chain, not just the machine itself, and the US appears to believe that banning the machine alone is not enough. Going forward, watch for 3 specific developments: the Dutch announcing additional export restrictions, ASML initiating a review of its internal controls, and stricter supplier audits across the EUV supply chain. 2 things in particular will define the next turning point: whether the Dutch government triggers additional export controls, and whether ASML releases any findings from an internal review. Those are the 2 signals to watch. That's all for today. I'll keep bringing you semiconductor news and analysis, so if you found this useful, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. This has been Ty on Semiconductor News Decoded.